Welcome to this presentation, Tree Biology, Why Do Trees Fall Down? So, is it really a problem if a tree falls down? So here's a picture of a tree in a woodland. It's fallen over. It's now a different kind of habitat. It's rotting, it's being decomposed and is forming part of the soil. So I guess you could say it depends if it's a problem or not. I mean, one of the things to think about is, are there any targets around? So, are there people around, buildings, infrastructure, railway lines, electricity cables? What's the impact of a tree falling down? Is anybody going to get hurt? And they're the things that we mainly worry about when we're talking about trees falling down in urban settings. It is also, of course, a problem about losing habitats. So trees form wonderful habitats for birds, for bats, for insects, other animals. And if lots of trees all fell down, we'd lose all of that. We'd also lose canopy cover. So it's really important that the leaves that we have on the trees, they're photosynthesizing, they're pulling carbon dioxide out of the air and storing it as carbohydrates in wood. And we need as much of that to happen as possible. So it is a bit of an issue for the climate crisis as well if lots of trees fall down. So I would say it can be a problem if a tree falls down. So let's think about why trees fall down. So there's four main kind of factors. Abiotic disorders. So these are things that are not living. So anything that's not kind of animals, pests, diseases, that kind of thing, that can impact on the tree. And we've also got decay as well. So they're the four main reasons that a tree would fall down. So thinking about abiotic disorders, so these are non-living disorders, and there's a photograph there at the top, which is the mangrove, and these are trees that are specially adapted to live in swampy water. So they have special roots called pneumatophores, which are able to survive and get all the nutrients that they need from water, but also the air as well. So whether the tree's got too much water or too little water, some trees are specially adapted. But typically trees in this country, in the UK, if there was excessive flooding, the roots would decay if they were too wet. But also too little water is an issue with drought. Similarly, aeration, so is there enough air in the soil, or is it really compacted so that the roots can't get the air that they need? Again, salinity, so is it too salty? Not salty enough. So we've got some trees that are specially designed, they've evolved to be surviving coastal regions where they're used to a certain amount of salt. But our street trees, typically in big cities, they're not used to salt. So when the roads are salted in the winter, that can really negatively impact on the trees. This is the acidity of the soil. It can be too high or too low. Temperature, obviously this is another big issue. If a tree is too hot, too much evaporation can happen. Although obviously some trees have evolved to cope with high temperatures. Sunburn and sun scald. Wind is a huge issue that causes trees to fall down, and we'll look at that in a minute. Air pollution, again, is an issue in cities generally. Lightning can cause trees to fall down. Mechanical means, so lots of different things can happen to trees, whether it's cars driving into them or strimmer damage or tractors, lots of things like that. And also herbicides, so specific chemicals designed to destroy foliage or plants. So quite a few of those things are actually about the soil. So soil is just really important. So let's have a think about what soil's made up of. It's made up of four things: the mineral matter, so rock particles; air, which is oxygen and other gases; water; and then also organic material. So this is humus, the very dead organic matter, living organisms, but also decaying organic matter as well. So ideal soil is made up of 45% minerals, 25% air, 25% water and 5% organic materials, including all of those organisms. So let's have a think about all the different microorganisms in soil. So the largest mass of these in soil is bacteria, and they're decomposers. So they decompose organic matter. They're very hardy, and they release nutrients from the organic matter that they're decomposing. And these nutrients are the things that trees and other plants can then use themselves. Actinomycetes, these are bacteria which grow mycelia like fungi, and people did used to think that they were fungi, but they're bacteria, and again, they're decomposers. Then we have fungi themselves, so these are neither plants nor animals, but make up a whole range of things from yeasts and mushrooms, rusts, mutts and mildews. They don't photosynthesize, so they need to get their energy from other things. In soil, there's also algae, which is mainly single-celled plants, protozoa, single-celled animals, nematodes, these are tiny like worms, and if you're a keen horticulturalist, you may have used nematodes as a way to act to reduce other invasive species, because they can be parasitic, some of these nematodes. Viruses, so viruses are infectious agents, and there's lots of those in the soil as well. So the soil itself has all of these creatures living in it, and then also the bigger creatures as well that we tend to think about. So it's got the earthworms, it's got insects, so whether it's kind of leather jackets, various arthropods, birds are feeding on these animals as well. And then we might have badgers or other things pulling up all the soil to get out all the little beasties in it. So the soil is a really important food web, and the tree roots and other plant roots are part of that. So another one of the abiotic factors are all the kind of atmospheric factors. So the first one we can look at is temperature. So a tree is a lot of water, and the leaves have tiny little gaps in them called stoma or stomata for gaseous exchange, but also for water evaporation. And in the hot weather, water will evaporate through the leaves, which is absolutely fine and normal. Hopefully there's enough water in the soil so that the tree can replace that water. Obviously, in a drought, that's a problem. And so excessive evaporation can cause real problems for trees. The leaves can also be sunburnt with sun in hot temperatures, and so that reduces their ability to photosynthesize. And trees can also suffer from sun scald, which is where ice or water trapped underneath the bark actually reaches boiling point and scalds the trees, cambium and other cells. Wind is obviously a huge issue, and probably one of the main causes of why trees fall over. We know about hurricanes, tornadoes. They are strong enough to pull out even a well-anchored tree. But a lot of the time it's because as humans we might have removed some trees from a little woodland, and that's meant that the trees that are left aren't as strong because they've not built up that lovely bit of trunk flare at the bottom from having bits of wind acting on them all the time, and so they're more likely to fall over. But trees have evolved over millions of years to cope with wind, and the way that they move their leaves helps to dampen the effect of wind as it moves through woodland. But there's a whole lot of stuff that you can look at in terms of biomechanics and sway to understand a bit more about the impact of wind on trees. In a city, air pollution is an issue. It can the particulates that come out of can be factories, but mainly kind of cars, and the particulates that come off tyres. They can block the stomata, those little holes in the leaves. They can cover the leaves and reduce photosynthesis. Ozone can actually damage leaves, and acid rain can damage leaves as well. Lightning can be a huge issue. There's a photo here of a tree that's virtually exploded after a lightning strike. So it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes you'll just see a line going down the bark, but it can be very detrimental. The other form of abiotic is the things that humans can do. And we call it abiotic because it's usually not just humans on our own, but it's like the mechanical devices that we use. So humans have created herbicides to kill plants that we don't like. And there's a couple of pictures there about the damage on leaves. The bottom picture is showing the effects of a chemical that was used by the United States of America in the Korean and Vietnam War. It's called Agent Orange, and it's a mass defoliant. And the idea was that if there were no trees around, then the Indigenous fighters wouldn't be able to hide behind them. So absolutely devastating effects of Agent Orange there. But also humans are really great at damaging trees through mechanical means. And the top photo there is showing strimmer damage. We tend to like our kind of grassland, and we want to keep the grass short, and operatives often damage the base of the tree trunks when they're strimming the ground. Also, here's one of three pictures of the same tree. It's been ring barked all the way around. So if you strip off that layer of cambium and the bark, the tree can no longer transport water and sugars up and down, and so it will die. And then who doesn't love a bit of graffiti? But there we go, some graffiti on a tree. Excessive graffiti, again, is destroying the vessels in the inner bark, so that the tree isn't able to move water and sugars around. So that's one of the other issues. Now, when we think about pests, there's an awful lot of different pests that will impact on trees. So there's quite a few that will impact on horse chestnuts. So there's a lot of different leaf miners and scales. Also bacteria canker on horse chestnuts. But if we think about pests, we're thinking about like little insects mainly. So that's leaf miners, oak processionary moth, various wasps form galls, which typically don't kill a tree. Aphids as well, so lime aphids particularly. And again, they don't kill a tree on their own. Grey squirrels, however, are a bit more of a pest, and they strip the bark from trees. And where trees are grown as a crop, this is a real issue. And in fact, there's been quite a bit of research on grey squirrels. And one of the things that some of the big companies are doing is actually setting out contraceptives as part of bait for grey squirrels to try and control the population, because they are incredibly damaging for trees. Rabbits and hares can also nibble the young saplings coming through, but also deer and sheep as well. So they'll nibble the saplings, so you don't get that regrowth in woodland. And here you can see from this picture really clearly where the leaves of the tree have been nibbled at sort of sheep head height. And so they are kind of fairly voracious eaters and will strip a woodland. And in some places, people who own woodlands actually kill off a certain number of deer every year to maintain a population that doesn't adversely impact on the natural regrowth of the woodland. So thinking about diseases, so there are an awful lot of diseases. So these are things like mainly fungi, but also bacteria, viruses, and there's some that have developed, have evolved over millions of years to just impact on one particular type of tree. So we have polypores, which are fungi, which will only affect, say, an ash tree or a birch tree. There are others that are quite happy. They'll then infect lots of different sorts of trees, like honey fungus. And on the whole, there are some trees that will survive with a small amount of decay caused by a fungus, but typically they can cause catastrophic problems with trees, particularly ones where it's actually in the roots or at the base, and so the tree will fall over. So here's a second page all about diseases, just there's so many different sorts. So just to kind of give you an idea, fungi, various diseases are a real issue. And one of the things that we've got to be really aware of is that where our trees that have lived, have evolved for this climate, for this sort of group of diseases and pests, where they've co-evolved, they've reached a balance. A problem that happens particularly is where something is imported into this country, so the trees don't have any kind of natural immunity to it, and that's why we've got to be so good on biosecurity and make sure that we're not importing diseases from other countries to this country, because our trees just aren't used to it and can have devastating impacts on our native population of trees. So thinking about decay then, which typically could be bacteria or fungi, but a tree is a kind of sealed system. So, it's got it. The trunk is covered with the bark, all there's kind of cuticles, epidermis over the leaves. It's a sealed system, inside of which is obviously all the wood, all the vessels, all the vesicles and water. And the more modern way of thinking about trees as systems from the work of Professor Lynn Boddy is actually that within the tree there are already bacteria, viruses, fungi. But when a tree is healthy, it's got a good balance, and it kind of naturally just fights off bacteria, viruses and fungi, just as part of its normal day-to-day workload, that it's got enough energy, it's healthy, and it's in balance. And it's only when something happens so that it's also impacted by some other pest or other diseases that maybe it's not in balance with, or it's got a wound from a strimmer, or a limb has fallen off due to the wind, or a tree surgeon, then the tree has got to use precious energy to deal with these other things, and that's when it can all get a bit out of whack. And I've put a photo here of somebody feeling a bit poorly at Christmas, because sometimes, we'll keep going and we'll keep going at work and everything's okay, and then as soon as we take a bit of a holiday and we have a rest, and our defences kind of go down, we suddenly get ill. And it's possibly not that we've been in contact with anybody with any new viruses or a new cold. It's maybe just that we had that already in us, and our body's just kind of gone, yeah, okay, tired, and we suddenly get taken over with an illness. So how does a tree deal with dysfunction? So unlike a human being, we would heal. So we would regrow cells, and the skin or whatever would kind of heal over. We might have a bit of a scar, but that would be it. Trees don't do that. Trees don't kind of produce new wood. What they do is they seal up the decay. So it's a defense mechanism that they use to seal that decay into the compartment in which it has developed. And so it's a way of preventing that decay from spreading. And a tree will do that in as quickly as it can, because the key thing is to stop that decay from spreading to the rest of the tree. So here's a picture of a kind of rotten kind of branch in a tree. Hopefully you can see that kind of the side view. And the first thing that the tree does is to strengthen the and block off the wall, the vessels at the top and the bottom of the area of decay. So that's the first thing it does, and it strengthens those areas and blocks off the vessels with a chemical change. So it's something like an increase in tannins. And the reason it's got to sort the vessels out is because that's the xylem and the phloem vessels. And they're transporting water and sugars all the way around the tree. And if the fungi or the bacteria got into those, it would be all over the tree really quickly. So that's vital that those vessels kind of get sealed off really quickly. Then the tree needs to seal off the annual ring at the back of the decay so that it doesn't spread further into the tree. It then needs to seal off the sides, which is where the rays are that give us those lovely rings when we cut through a tree trunk. So it seals off the rays, so again that the decay can't get all the way around the tree, kind of going around the side. And then finally it seals off the front of the decay. So here it grows some very special wound wood, which is really strong wood. And you may have noticed this on trees where they grow that looks a bit like a donut. So that's that really kind of hyper strong wood that over a few years closes over and seals in the decay. But the first thing that the tree has to do is to really stop that decay going up and down through the vessels at the back and then at the sides. And so finally it seals off the decay into a little compartment. And this is called CODIT, compartmentalisation of dysfunction in trees. So some trees are better than this at others. Some trees are really good compartmentalisers. As soon as there's a bit of a decay starting, they very quickly start sealing it off. So trees that are really good at this are oaks and planes. No wonder they live so long. They're really good at managing decay. Other trees are really poor compartmentalisers. It might be that they just take a long time to get round to realising that there's kind of decay, and so it takes them a long time to seal things off. It might be that the chemical seals aren't that good, and it just means that the decay will spread more in the tree. So the ones that are really poor compartmentalisers are trees like horse chestnut, the willows, poplar. And you'll often find people, wood carvers, talking about how poor horse chestnut is as a wood because it just breaks up. It's not good at compartmentalising. So if a tree is going to survive, it needs to be really good at compartmentalising decay and dysfunction, and that will help it keep standing for longer. So when we're thinking about trees, they're living beings responding all the time to the environment. They can't move anywhere, so they can't, run away from the strimmer or the tractor or the pest or the disease. They've just got to kind of keep going, and so they've evolved all these defence mechanisms. And here again is the Mannion spiral of all the different sorts of things that are impacting on trees. And I guess one of the things is we've got to be conscious of is that trees can survive a lot and they can deal with a lot. But sometimes what happens is that you have a lot of negative things happening all at the same time. So take the poor horse chestnut at the moment. Many of our horse chestnuts, they're losing their leaves already. Kind of in September, their leaves are dropping, which is reducing the amount of time that they've got to photosynthesize. So they're not building up those important stores of carbohydrates to take them through the winter. And they've not got enough energy to deal with pests and diseases. And there's horse chestnut leaf miner, there's horse chestnut scale, there's horse chestnut bacterial canker. We've also got an increasingly warming temperature, so they're evaporating water a lot more in summer. The summers are drier, so they're really struggling with drought. So some of our trees are really struggling with a whole range of impacts, and these will be the trees that will fall down. So these are the trees that we have to keep monitoring. But isn't it amazing at how many other things are impacting on trees at the same time? And most of our trees are still standing and are doing really well despite of all of this.